tips as usual. All participants will be muted. And those who have attended this before know that we will have time at the end for your Q&A. Type in your questions at the bottom of the screen. There is a Q&A box. Please put your questions in there and keep it brief. If you have any further questions or points that you wish to make, please email them to Aarohana, that's spelled with 2 A's, Rohana @niceorg.in. You can check out our website as well, niceorg.in. We are also streaming on Facebook, facebook.com/niceorg.in. And we would love for you to be part of the larger NICE friends and community. We are there on LinkedIn, and the information about that is at the bottom of the screen. Kindly make a note of that and do log in. So with that, welcome all of you once again to this session on food enterprises, the investments in it, the nature of the business, what one needs to look out for, what have been the lessons from it, and so on. And in the course of this entire 45 minutes or thereabouts, we will learn a lot about this business of foods. And we have great pleasure in welcoming Bharat Kaushik, who is the Chief Business Officer, founder of Adukale. And I have Ashwath Shastri, who's closely involved with Adukale as an investor and somebody who looks at lots of early stage businesses as an angel investor. And the interesting thing about Adukale is that it's a very, very specific kind of food item. I'll leave it to Bharat and Ashwath to talk about it, which has got very specific regional influences and origins, yet at the same time it can be, and it is actually being tasted and eaten all around the world. So which is a very fascinating thing for all of us, and I'm sure we look forward to learning a lot more as we make progress. So let me start off with you, Bharat. As the founder of Adukale, can you just walk us through what made you start this, given that your background is not really in this area? What made you start this, and how did you go about the whole process? And for the benefit of our listeners, please also tell us what the name itself means.
Yeah, the name is actually a fascinating part of where history and mythology meet, and there's a very nice amalgamation of sorts, right? First of all, thank you very much for having me on the panel. I mean, I've heard a lot of good things about you guys, and follow what you guys do, and what you guys are doing is something really commendable, and I think it is required in the time and space that we are at right now, right? One small correction: I'm not the founder of Adukale, right? Thankfully, and fortunately for me, parents did all the grunt work. So they started this when I was happily in the US earning my dollars and working in a software company there, right? So they started this in about 2009, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, the year that I went to the US, and I think they were used to working 18, 19 hours a day. And after I went, I don't think they had anything else to focus on because I was out of their sight at that particular point in time, right? And then Dad was a part of General Mills. He had set up the sales and distribution for the Pillsbury Atta in the south and the east. Mom had worked, rather was continuing to work then at LIC, and both of them were used to working humongously long hours and thereabouts, right? So Dad at that point of time had quit his job, and then I had left to the US, and he was used to spending about 18, 19 hours a day working, and all of a sudden he was like, what, there's nothing else to do, right? And my grandmother was an exceptionally good cook, right? So we belong to a community called Sanketis. A bit of history: we are probably on the endangered species of the World Wildlife Fund. Probably there are about 85,000 people of ours left. We have historically moved in from the Kerala-Tamil Nadu border, right? We moved across the Kerala-Tamil Nadu border, moved into Coorg, and finally settled down along the river Kaveri, like lot of hamlets around the river Kaveri, right? So our language is a mix of Kannada, Telugu, Tamil, and Malayalam. We don't have a script; we write in Kannada. The food that way also has flavors brought in from all those 4 states, right? So we can proudly say that we represent the best of what South India has to offer, right? So Sanketis are in general known as very good musicians, have a keen sense of taste, and apparently we were known for our gambling. right? There is no Sanketi family that doesn't have any one of these check marks, check boxes ticked, right? Net, parents started this about in 2009, taking my grandmother's recipe. My grandmother at that time was probably 90 or 85, right? And she was I mean, she never measured things in her life, right? So for her, it was just a fistful of salt. It's just a inner fist of salt. It's just a pinch of sugar, and then that's about it, right? It was magic at the kitchen, right? So we wanted to see how we could kind of get those flavors across to the wider consumers, because anybody and everybody who came and had food in our house would always rave about her food, right? And then it was a laborious process where we started off in a very small kitchen. By the way, in Sanketi, Adukale means a kitchen, right? So we started off in a very small kitchen. The first product that we produced was rasam powder, right? And then we started giving it to friends and family. That took off. We moved from a 10 by 10 kitchen to a bigger space, and things grew organically. We haven't spent money on marketing till now. The growth has been through word of mouth, and people who've been our consumers since 2009 tell us that the food reminds them of how their grandmothers used to cook or how their mothers used to cook, right? So for us at Adukale, it's more about preserving a culture. There's always people talk about Chettinad cuisine, people talk about Tamil cuisine, people talk about Andhra, and we have our own unique recipes. So we thought, okay, why can't there be a Sanketi cuisine, right? So it all started from there, right? And thankfully the products were good, and we use the same processes that we use at home. The ingredients that we use are the same ingredients that we use at home. It's just on a larger scale, right? So that way the product kind of took traction. Word of mouth was our biggest and is our biggest marketing avenue. Like, people gift our products as gifts to friends. Everybody who comes to someone else's house gives them a sample and say, please try this, it's very good. So that's how we have grown, right? We have not spent money we have not pushed our products into the marketplace, right? It's been pull that has driven our sales so far. So net, that's a brief history of who we are, what we do, and a little bit of history, mythology, and everything.
Yeah, fascinating. Thank you so much, Bharat. And this whole idea about word of mouth marketing, right? What is now kind of almost one of the established channels for marketing a product, particularly something that is, like you said, reminds one of home cooking. And you have become a multi-crore business now. And all of it has happened, like you said, without spending money on marketing, which I'm sure brings a lot of joy to Ashwath, who is an investor in Adukale. So let me very quickly move over to Ashwath and get him to talk about how did the two of you meet? What did he like about Adukale, and what did he invest in? What was he anticipating? What was he expecting? When he put his money into Adukale. Over to you, Ashwath.
Thank you, Sanjay. Yeah, see, our association with Adukale is very interesting because so we created a early investment fund way back in 2016, and Bharat was introduced to us through a running club, actually. Okay, where Bharat runs, and one of my partner also runs, and they had conversation and some interesting ideas we were picking up on the culture space, especially food tech kind of cultural space. And so we just decided to meet them and talk to them. So we invited them. We had a very nice conversation. We understood the range of products they already have in the market. We actually discussed that, and afterwards we didn't really take it that seriously, I would say, in the beginning. But what really happened was, see, I live in an apartment community where on Gauri Ganesha week, every day, some of us have to volunteer to make prasadam and distribute it to the community. So we were invited to distribute about 5 kgs of some prasadam on a particular day. And me and my wife started wondering, what do we do? 5 kgs, my wife also has a school to run, and I was busy with my own work. I suddenly remembered what we had conversation with Bharat and his father. So we said, why don't we go to this place called Grameen and pick up this product, Gojavalaki packet, try it out, how it comes. And if it comes out, we will bring 5 kgs of Gojavalaki packet and that's what we'll serve as prasadam. So we went, picked up 250 grams pack and we just followed the instruction the way it said it in the packet. And I will tell you, it was fabulous, outstanding. Even at home, we cannot recreate the taste. And it exactly reproduced the way we wanted it. We blindly followed the instructions. We said, this is the way to go. So what we did, we went and purchased 5 kgs of packets again. We made the prasadam and we put it on the community hall where the Ganesha festival was going on. Everybody came who tasted, said, where is it from? Where is it available? That is how the journey started for us. And then the next possible event, I went, picked up few more packets of Gojavalaki. I invited all my business partners to my home for some occasion. I served it. When they ate it, they asked, how did you do it? I said, remember Adkale, Bharat and his father came, it is their product. Then we caught on to it. We said, oh, here is a product which is nice. So then we experimented for a few more weeks on all other products like Upma and Poha. It was very consistent, very tasty. Even at home, I cannot produce a similar one. So I said, guys, I think it is worth going, talking to them again, visit their factory, see how they do things, and then see if we can invest and walk along with them. This is exactly how we started, and we went. Fabulous factory, very nice setup, very good range of products. We thought it has promising future for sure. So we made an investment.
Great. Thanks, Ashwath. So very quick summary of what we've learned so far, right? Find a unique, a unique niche, which is and with a story, a narrative, right? In one of our earlier sessions, we learned about the importance of narrative construction, a story that catches the imagination of people. Number two, and the most important, is build a great product. The product speaks for itself. And the third, make sure you're in a running club that has got Ashwath as one of its members, right? So these are some of the key lessons that we've learned so far. Now, moving on, right? I'm sure, in between we had a couple of years of COVID and all of that. And so money came in and then, you had to expand, you had to grow your business and all of it. What was that initial period like after you raised money? I'm sure there was the pressure or at least the motivation to grow. What did you do with that capital that came in? And I'm sure there must have been a lot of pressure to go online, to do this, that, and the other. What was that initial period like? What all did you try? What did you learn in those initial couple of years?
Yeah, right. The pressure was something that thankfully we don't associate with Shastri and the investors, right? I mean, they're more like our mentors and friends and well-wishers rather than somebody who just sits on top of our head and, keeps pressurizing us to do things. I mean, in fact, we consider ourselves incredibly fortunate to have them on our cap table, right? The stories that you hear these days about how investors are pressuring companies and how companies are pressured by investors, that has not happened. There's no pressure as such. I mean, right? We want to grow, we have to grow, which is why we kind of, we have that ambition built in, and the investment group asks us the right questions and, guides us in the right way, right? But to answer your question, the way we did it was, primarily the money that we raised was for rocket fuel, right? It was to grow exponentially, right? We feel that Adukla is at a place where a lot of companies struggle to find the right product market fit. Fortunately, by luck, by design, and by whatever good fortune, we have a product that we have found the product market fit, right? Like 9 out of 10 people who try our products come back the second time, right? And that is, I'm not saying it because it's our baby, but that's what data tells us, right? So 9 out of 10 people, my only challenge is how do I get my customers to taste my product, right? And then once they taste them, we are very, very, very sure that they'll come back, right? So the first thing that we did was we were like, okay, now online was a no-brainer for us, right? Like I had come down from the US. For me, getting our products online where people could order it themselves and then have it delivered home was a no-brainer, right? That we started that off right away. That channel took off tremendously well. We started spending small amount of money on digital marketing, got our branding right, got the story right, got that thing out there, and that's a pretty profitable channel for us, right? And for us, our biggest question was like, how do we spread the message across that, hey, boss, we are here, right? And we have these 60 plus products in our portfolio. As a company, we are conservative in how we spend money, and we think 10 times before we spend money, right? It's just the same way that a house runs, right? We are not a typical middle class family, right? So our thing was putting up holdings, putting up television ads. It's expensive, and nobody knows what sort of returns you get on that investment, right? So we figured out, you know what, instead of that, let's open up our own experience center, right? Pick up a very high visibility area in Bangalore where people, our customers who we think are customers of Adukale live, and then put up an experience store there, right? So we opened up our first experience store with the money we raised from 72 Degrees in Malleshwaram. That is the heart of old Bangalore, right? If you divide Bangalore into north and south, there's Malleshwaram on the north, which is very, very traditional, still has the charms of old Bangalore, and then there's Gandhinagar in the south, right? So we opened up our first outlet in Malleshwaram. We didn't do it like any other outlet where products are stuck to the brim and there's no connect between the customer and the brand, right? So we kept it very open. We designed it very aesthetically, where the products are it's wide, it's open. People think it's not a food store at all. People think it's like a jewelry store or a boutique store, right? We called it an experience center. We started giving out samples to people. Like we never hesitated in giving humongous quantities of food as samples to people, right? So that took off very well, right? So that was, and we said instead of paying money for a holding where we end up paying the same amount of money for a holding, we put up an experience store, pay the same amount of money as rent, do it well, and the brand speaks for itself there, right? So within 4 months of opening up that experience store, we hit break even on that store from a P&L perspective, and since then it's been profitable. In 2019, we opened up our second experience store in Gandhi Bazaar, right? And the good thing about that is it serves as a way for the brand to spread itself, right, without cannibalizing my retail outlets, right? So there are outlets near Malleshwaram which keeps our products. Their sales increased because more and more people came to know about our brand, right? More and more people came and visited our store, and that's how it is. So how we spent the money was online was a no-brainer. That kicked off very well because there were a lot of people who knew about the food, who wanted good South Indian food, and so they used to pick up brands for a lack of a better choice. And we gave an alternative where we don't use any preservatives, no additives, no colors, and the food resembles very closely, what they used to eat at home. In fact, we get emails from customers every day. They say that the moment they eat our kodbade or gojolaki, it reminds them of how their grandmothers used to cook, right? And then that's an exceptionally good thing for a brand to have, right? Especially when it comes to food, where it can trigger nostalgia, is something that a brand strive to get, and we had that on the back of a good product. So digital marketing, our brand underwent a slight image makeover. Before when Shastri picked up our first packet of Gojolaki, it was a very small transparent pouch which didn't look good on the shelf, right? So we rejigged our packaging. Now the packaging looks bright, it stands out, it maintains the ethos and our culture. We did that. We opened up our experience center. We expanded our product portfolio. So all of that happened at the back of it.
Great. That was very helpful in that if you got this product market fit, and then you went ahead with this experience center, you said, look, I'm not going to spend money on this ads and hoardings and all of that. I'll come back to you, and because there's some more questions that will be of interest to the audience. So coming to you, Ashwath, that so now you made the investment, and then Adukale is off to the races. Now, clearly, when you put in the money, there must have been a set of assumptions about the growth or the expansion, whether it is on the product lines, whether it's on the geographies, whether it's on the channels, whether it's on improving the supply chain and so on. What all did you experience as an investor in Adukale before and after the investment? Meaning you went in with a thesis and then subsequently, you saw what was happening. What were the learnings from that whole process, and that will be of use to our audience.
Yeah, very interesting thoughts. Before we made the investment and what was running in our mind, so we realized that the products by Adukale are excellent choices for bachelors, especially in US and European sector where they are alone and they want to cook. Students, they would be looking for this kind of products. We in fact thought that it has a great potential to sell in Europe and US markets, and it will grow like anything. That was a fundamental thought that came to our mind. And when we discussed about packaging and things like that, I mean, we gave some ideas what we thought could do well. Bharat was very open to it, and that is something they were also thinking in parallel. So the packaging changed, and after we invested, the product remained, and there were people who are buying, we were buying, and we are also trying to spread the news around. But what changed, I would say, is in immediately after COVID, I would say March 23rd or 24th, there's a chaos all around. The roads were blocked, and in our circles, we knew senior citizens who used to depend on cooks. Suddenly, cooks were not allowed to come inside the complexes. They needed something with which they can manage their breakfast and things like that, right? So I wanted to get as much of Adukale packets as possible ordered and then distribute it to these people and make sure that they have food available to them. So I called Bharat and I placed a fairly huge order at that time. And what I liked about Bharat and his team is it was very difficult to hire a truck, move around in Bangalore, make sure that the order reaches. That too, it's a big quantity. But the commitment was so high, the morning I ordered, I spoke to him in person. Evening, he managed to get it delivered to my complex. And since then, whenever it was required, it was always available to us. And whatever improvements his team said he will do it, we could see that happening on a continuous basis. And every time we mention about this product to somebody, they go and experience it in their home, they would come back and say, now we want it continuously. How do we place the order? What is the best mechanism? And Bharat significantly improved the delivery process. That is what I'm happy with. Throughout the 2020 and 21 lockdown period or otherwise, the time to deliver the product once the order was placed, he managed to reduce it to about maximum 24 hours. I don't think he took more than 24 hours anyway. And the product quality was also very consistent. It never changed from, even today morning, I prepared upma from that product only, Adukale product only. It's so consistent. It will never change. So my complex people wanted, they used to go out and bring it or place order online. They said, why can't we keep those products in our superstores here in the complex? So I proposed it, Bharat. He was very open, immediately connected with the store manager. The product started becoming available. Now, I saw a question in the chat box. MTR is jealous of us in the complex because ever since we started keeping the Adukale products, the demand for MTR products went down. You hardly find any MTR products in the stores now. So these are some of the positive developments that happened, which made us believe that this team is here to stay and make a difference in the market. They were doing the right thing in the marketing side. They were reaching out to customers in whichever the way they can reach out to keep up their promise. I think those are the essential things to grow the business in this nature.
Fantastic. I mean, I think you touched upon things that are so important. That is an obsession with customer service and making sure that every customer gets what they want in the shortest possible time, building the best product from a taste standpoint, Number three, consistency, because that's very critical, because people, it's a product that needs to be experienced. So coming to you, Bharat, how did you ensure all of these things? How did you ensure that the product quality was consistent, that you created this culture of obsessing about customer service? How did you go about ensuring that delivery cycle times were reduced, right? And there are a series of things. And also, while you're talking about it, if you can help us understand who the persona is of your product, right? I mean, because you created this experience center. Aswat talked about folks outside of India, but at your experience center, how do you design the store, and who did you keep in mind as a potential buyer, and how did you arrive at that person? You're on mute, Bharat. You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah. I mean, I don't disappoint a bunch of people when you ask me about who the persona is. Unfortunately, we don't know, right? We have seen instances where there's an auto rickshaw a driver who uh, uh, comes in an auto rickshaw to buy code bade package home, and there's a guy who comes in a BMW at the Merc and comes and picks up the product and goes to his house, right? So we have people across, the traditional SEC A, B, C. We have people across the spectrum, right? We have people who are young. I mean, just the day before yesterday, I spoke to a guy who is 90 plus years old, still likes code bades, hard and crispy, and he wanted our code bade. And there's a millennial who's about 15 years old who lives in the UK who wants our product equally badly, right? So I think more from a demographic perspective, I think psychographically it is people who appreciate good food, who have a love for culture, and who have an open mind when it comes to tasting new cuisine is, I think, who we are after. I think that fits the persona well. And in the current age, the world is flat, the world is smaller. Anybody, I don't think food now you can benchmark and say, you know what, this is eaten by only this subset of people. I think it is more and more global, as long as the quality is good and people know that you're delivering on what you are, right? And what it is that you have mentioned on the packaging. And I hope that answered the question. And I'm sorry I can't get any more specific than that, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was your other question?
Yeah, so folks who like good food. The other point of how did you go about refining your delivery processes? How to make sure that you were able to deliver on time to the customer? Because say within 24 hours or whatever time you set, how did you ensure that? Two, how did you deal with the supply issues on the supply side to make sure that all of those are able to ramp up to meet demand? Third, how did you ensure consistency of quality? What were the things that you did within the organization?
See, consistency and quality. My parents run the show every day, right? So there are people in the 60s who go to the factory every day, and no batch of products which is not tasted by any one of us, right? Like it's me, my mom, dad, my aunt. One of us has to taste the product, and only if we say it's okay, it goes out of the factory. Otherwise, it doesn't. Like there have been instances where we feel it was not up to the mark. We have disposed about 300 kgs of products into the garbage. We keep joking that next to our factory, the cows have become very fat because they keep eating all the gojolakis and the code bades that we throw if they don't meet our expectations, right? So that way, I mean, there is a obsession with using the best ingredients. It's the same way, right? Like at home, if you cook something, you don't compromise on raw materials. It's the same fundamental principle that guides our production process as well. We don't compromise on the quality of raw material at all. It is whatever. I mean, if we don't use it at home, we don't use it in the production facility. It's as simple as that, right? And we don't change vendors just because there's another vendor that gives the product at a lower price. No, we don't. For example, rava is a very important ingredient for us when we manufacture upmas and everything. Rava prices keep fluctuating, but for us, the rava from a particular vendor works always because he's consistent, right? Like when I tell people that for 1 measure of upma, you need to add 2 measures of water. With him, it's always 2 measures of water, right? For somebody else, another vendor, sometimes it could be 1.5 cups, sometimes it could be 2.5 cups. You don't know, right? And that vendor would probably give it to us at a cheaper price, but we don't. Like we know for a fact that this vendor has been consistent, and we stick to him no matter what. Right? So in the supply chain process, that's what it is, right? So we don't use ingredients which we don't use at home. So that's straight away half of the products get tossed out. And there's an obsession over quality, right? I mean, there's a lot of trial and error. Before we finalize on a product, it's sent to a bunch of people to taste. We are very critical in terms of whether we like it or not, and it passes a whole bunch of quality parameters. We get the products tested in the lab. And basically, I mean, we don't have this, we don't grow the products, right? So we need to ensure that the products that we get also have the same quality parameters that we strive for. So that part is handled quite meticulously. And in terms of delivery, yeah, that was a very big hassle, right? So we believe that food is something that should be eaten fresh. So our obsession is how can we ensure that the customers get the food as quickly and as fresh as possible, right? So thankfully now there are a lot of these hyper local delivery partners who ensure that product reaches as quickly. So now we work with a company called Blowhorn. The guy who runs Blowhorn, Mithun, he's a huge fan of our products, right? So he picked up our product from a store and wrote to us on Twitter, and Mithun and I started talking, and Mithun was like, "Hey, Bharat, I'm doing this, by the way." So I immediately joined hands with him, and they handle all our deliveries in Bangalore, right? So Blowhorn has been exceptionally good in terms of getting our products to our customers within 24 hours in Bangalore. So now we are in talks with them to kind of do same day deliveries across all metros as well. So hopefully that should kick off in the next month or two.
Great, thanks. Ashwath, coming to you, after you made the investment and you saw, the company growing, and like Bharat said, you are a patient investor. You're not somebody looking for, super normal quick returns. I'm sure with all the experimentation that Adukale has done, there would have been mistakes. There would have been lessons learned. What were the lessons learned from?
Yes. So what I have observed in the last 4 years, okay, see, our expectation was that the upmas and gujjavalakkis will hit the market more than the snacks. Okay, because that is one area where there is no good competition in those products. But what we found was actually snacks picked up, the taste of the snacks picked up more than the upmas, and because upmas and poha still require some processing to be done. You still need to, it's still dependent on the people who are doing it, right? Even though instructions are very clear, 1:2 water and so on, if they put a little more water, a little less water, it messes up the product. But snacks were superb. You just open it and eat it. So that is one thing we observed that, of course, Bharat can tell us, I don't go into the details of how much they are selling in the product, snacks versus this category. But I can say as an end user, as well as what we have been hearing as a feedback from different sources, snacks are doing very well in the stores. And those who are used to upmas and pohas are still picking up, and most of the houses that I am aware of, they no longer make upma from first principles. So one of the feedback we gave them is, international market is very, very large. And as an investor, that is where we would want to focus on to grow our money. And we still need to have a model where the items can sell in bulk. I think they have addressed that problem now. I think last bulk shipment happened beginning of this month is what we got the update, and that is only going to increase going forward. That is one market, and I think this is also the time where the product, their product should hit pan India. In fact, there is a question in the question answer box: is it available in Chennai? From the website, definitely they can deliver it to Chennai today, right, Bharat?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
But soon they will also be expanding their operations. They have some plans to go to metros, which he also mentioned. then it becomes a lot more easier. I think the marketing was good. The channels of marketing, they were cautious in the way they expanded. But now they are at a phase where I think they should go uh, ballistic. And see, for me, interest is not so much about how much business they make and how much money we get back. That will happen in whatever the way it has to happen. These products are such that more and more people should become aware of it, and they should taste it, and if they like, they should buy it. I think that is the win-win for this kind of investment.
Understand. So the really, what I'm hearing you say again and again is that the product wins by itself, because the more people who are aware of it and taste it at least once tend to come back and try a second time, and then thereafter it becomes a habit. Bharat, based on what Ashwath said, let me ask you the same question. Clearly, you've been experimenting a lot on all parameters, right? Everything from the supply side to delivery to product mix, recipes, packaging, channels of marketing, all of that. Can you just help us understand what was, let's say, some experiment or something that you tried that you had great hopes for, but it didn't work out, and what were the lessons you learned from it? It could be, let's say, a channel issue, it could be a quality issue, it could be a customer issue, whatever.
Well, I mean, if you plot the customer journey right from let's say the supply chain to in deliveries, we have tried experiments in all those areas and failed and learned, and then got better. I think it would be. I mean, we have failed in all those aspects, right? Right from sourcing of raw materials, we have issues with suppliers where all of a sudden one supplier, maybe it was as simple as one supplier after COVID just shut down, and he was a very important supplier for us, right? And we don't stock inventory, right? We believe that food has to be eaten fresh, so we don't keep like tons and tons of raw materials in the factory, right? At any point in time, we get raw materials for that particular week. It gets manufactured, it gets dispatched, and we don't stock raw materials or finished products in the factory, right? So that was an issue. Then we had to kind of look at different vendors, go through the entire trial process again. Streamlining delivery was a huge problem. We depend on, so before we found Blowhorn, we changed courier partners left, right, and center, right? Because none of them treated food with the kind of respect that it deserves, right? Food was not handled, and unfortunately, and it's also true that if the courier guy messes up, people still blame the company, right? The ball lies in our court, right? The buck stops with us, right? So there have been instances where we have, kind of spent sleepless nights in trying to figure out how to, ensure that the product remain, their sanctity is not violated anyway until it reaches the mouth of the customer, right? And thankfully, the customers are also quite understanding when it comes to these issues, and they understand, right? And they have a lot of customers have given us second chances because they feel that it's a product worth giving a second chance to, right? So yeah, I mean, we have learned. It's not that we have not made mistakes. We made a lot of mistakes, and in terms of packaging, we have made a few mistakes. We've learned from them. Now we have a panel of food scientists and packaging experts who kind of help us navigate these questions. And doing business in India is not very easy, right? And the packaging standards are very vague. The laws, the taxation laws are very vague, and it's not easy to kind of get through those nitty-gritties and those alleys, right? So yeah, we have kind of faltered there, but we have had the right people at the right time to kind of help us and take us out of those.
Thanks. See, one of the challenges that any food business grapples with is, how do I reach my customer, right? And, should I go online? Should I go offline? If I go offline, should I go through setting up my own retail stores? Should I get distribution done, etc., etc.? Can you just take a few minutes, briefly, to tell us your thinking about distribution? And Ashwath, if you can just add to that, please. And after that, we'll open up I will get into the Q&A that audience members have posted.
Yeah, see, distribution, again, like if I were to start this business today, I would do digital first. Like it's a no-brainer, right? The kind of You can do very quick experiments with less money spent, get your product market fit right, build your initial traction. So I would do it digital first, but distribution and retail, I think, is where no matter how much we talk about people in India buying things online, a bigger chunk of people buy things offline, right? Distribution is the key for any brand to kind of hit scale and grow exponentially. That's where the money is and where the bigger market is, right? So I think it's imperative for brands to find out what works for them. It's a factor of what is the money that you're willing to spend, how deep your pockets are, and how much rocket fuel you have to burn, right? And ultimately, it's a question of it's an equation that has all these parameters in place. So whatever solves your equation, I think it is best you pick that model. And I don't think there's a model that says there's a one size fits all here, but digital is an easier way to kind of try out your product market mix, try out whether you're, I mean, in this journey of Adukle, we have seen a lot of brands who try to come up with the same set of products that we do, but somehow they falter and they spend exorbitant amount of money in distribution, but then the product is not up to the mark and it fails, right? So I think focus on the product, have an obsessive quality on quality, focus on quality, get that right. Try it on digital, get your product market fit right, and eventually I think get on retail. I think is what I would do if I were to start Adukle today.
Sure. Thanks. Ashwath, do you wish to add to that?
Yeah, specifically on the distribution, what I want to say is it's very important, whichever the channel through which distribution has to happen, making sure the availability of the product is very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You go to, we publish a experience store in Malleshwaram, Gandhi Bazaar, wherever, and people walk all the way there, and the most obvious products they want to pick up, if it is not there in the aisle, that is a clear no-no. That is especially true in general stores where a lot of alternate products are available. See, other day, I stepped into a store where I was looking at Adukale products, and I also looked at specifically this Muruku, right? Chakli kind of thing. There are at least 8 options available, 8 different companies, and packets were kept pretty much side by side. Now, what is the incentive for a general walk-in customer to pick up Adukale versus others? Mm-hmm. Other than the packaging, color, attraction, things like that. I did a quick homework. So everybody was selling, somebody was selling at 150 grams, 180 grams, 175 grams, 200 grams. Somebody was 75, somebody was 80, somebody was 65. And then if you look at the price versus quantity versus attraction, Adukale stood out, at least in my assessment, it stood out. It was lesser in price for the quantity they were selling. And at the same time, the package looked fresh. The vacuum was retained in the packet and things like that. It's very important to make sure products are available, the most popular ones, irrespective of which channel it is. And if you allow people to switch, customer to switch because the product is not available, very difficult to bring them back in this space. So distribution and availability goes hand in hand, and that's where a lot of good work has to happen.
Correct. Because one of the things I imagine is that a lot of these purchases are impulse purchases, right? Nobody is planning 1 week in advance that I'll go on Sunday and buy Adukale, this, that, and the other. So it's very important that distribution be absolutely top of the line. So that is great. Now, let me just get to a couple of the questions that have been put in the question box. One of them you've already addressed about distribution in Chennai. The question from Pranjali, the question is, when you typically want to export Indian products, packaged or fresh with Indian specific masalas overseas, what are the typical issues one has to deal with? Licenses, checks, regulation, nutrition value related, and what are the problems that one should be aware of, and so that one can address it upfront? Bharat, if you can.
Yeah, so I think each country has its own rules and regulations, right? So a lot of, I mean, especially the US, Europe, and Australia, they're incredibly strict when it comes to the back of pack requirement, right? So we have a consultant who helps us with the back of pack standards for each and every country. To start exporting it, there are a bunch of licenses that you need to get. You need to have an import-export code. The factory has to follow certain things. Each country has its own set of tests that they run on samples that are sent. So all of that, right? Each country has its own set of rules that you need to follow.
So where does one find the consultants who can help us navigate through this set of requirements?
There are people who do that.
Meaning, can I Google and find some names? Is there a particular group that exists?
There are a lot of them who do that.
So I can Google and find people.
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so that is helpful. Okay, so that's one. Second question from Dr. Vyas is, you're in the food business. How do you ensure that your recipe is secret, right? I mean, you've got employees, and it's related question to what Pooja Kulwal also asks. How do you ensure consistency because there's employee turnover? And how do you ensure A, the recipe is quote unquote secret, and B, while there's employee turnover going on, how do you ensure consistency?
Well, I would like to answer that philosophically, right? It's not rocket science at the end of the day, right? It's basically, food is an art, and some people have it, some people don't, right? I don't know how many people here speak Kannada, but in Kannada there's a notion called kai ruchi or kai hada, right? Like each person's hand has gives its own signature to the kind of dish that is being prepared, right? Like if you take the same rasam powder and give it to three different people, they make rasam in three different ways, though the recipe is the same, right? So that way, we have issues where people leave, people come, people go. There are certain things that is inside the family, but ultimately it's the production floor and everybody has to know it. And that's where I think the brand's strength of the brand comes into picture. Like if you keep two separate packs of the same Adukle packet, with one in Adukle brand and other in other brand, people would say that Adukle product is better because of the bias that that they have been used to the Adukle brand, despite the fact that the other packet also has the same thing in place. So yeah, I mean, it's not rocket science at the end of the day. So we are, though we would like to say that the recipe is secret and all of that, it's not. Like I can give you the recipe and I'm very sure that if you do it 2 times, it will come out 2 different ways. I have absolutely no.
Which means that there is consistency in the preparation, right? So because right now, is that codified? Is there a process that is followed?
There is.
Okay,
Yeah,
got
there
it.
is.
Okay.
And so the recipe is actually irrelevant. It becomes irrelevant. Right? The entire process, there's a lot of science behind the entire process, and there's a lot of art in figuring out at what particular point in time a particular ingredient needs to be added. Right? It's not just and swadanusar is a very subjective term which is where most of the magic happens. So that's a gut feel that can never be replicated. Right?
And that's the difference between the best chefs in the world and those who just follow a recipe, right? Yeah, I understand. Got it. There is another question that is about from Vikash Hilt Brands. Typically in all of these savory products, condiments, how do you determine what is the right level of spice? Because spices are a very, variable and personal preference.
Yep. So my wife doesn't like our product. She finds it to be incredibly spicy. So I hope that answers the question.
So within the same family, you could have a variation.
Within the same family. And my in-laws, I mean, all of them find our products. I mean, they cry when they eat our code. But
okay.
we feel that it's always better to have a kind of sweat trickle down when you eat something spicy. So it is, and with food, again, it's very subjective. I don't think there's a one size fits all. Ultimately, if you are happy eating the food that you manufacture, I think that's a good. And you hope that there are,
what you're eating.
Yeah, and you hope that there are a lot of people similar to your taste buds who will probably pick up your product.
Right.
But that's about it. So and if 10 people say something is not right, then you need to have the humility to accept that something is not right. So
correct. And then you go back to the drawing board and start.
Go back to the drawing board, and that's where I'm very, very paranoid about hearing negative feedback more than positive feedback, because I know for a fact that if somebody likes a product, they come back and buy the second time, so I know he's happy. But very few people actually tell you that something is bad. They very quietly, silently walk away without telling you, that something is wrong. So when we get some negative thing about a product, we jump on that pretty quickly, right? We are very, very paranoid when it comes to those negative reviews, and we take them incredibly, incredibly serious.
Right. Now, I mean, that's a very, very important point, right? That is, those who don't give feedback and are likely to give negative feedback or adverse feedback are very important to cultivate. How do you ensure that you get that feedback, right? Because, right? And Ashwath, how do you ensure that, like you said, you went to the store and you saw Adukale there, price and packaging and quantity and all that. How do you ensure that the adverse feedback bit of it is not lost?
Yes, that's very important. So when I speak as part of this whole product mentoring process, when I speak to the customers, normally I ask questions. There have been occasions where people said they didn't like it. Specifically they have a very nice visible bath powder package, but people who are used to certain type of visible bath, they find it very spicy, and it requires a slightly specialized skill to prepare the visible bath. Unless you do it, you won't like it. So normally what we do is, whenever I hear such feedback, I'll go back, I'll buy the product, I will try it out myself to see what the challenges were there. And every time I find a new way of doing it or something like that, I will pass it on to Bharat and his team. So make sure that we are not lost.
So it's a constant feedback loop that keeps running, right? I mean, from whoever you hear, you then go back, try it out, make sure it is thing, and then keep communicating that back again to people, right?
Exactly.
The question is now the question from Shiva, which is the last question, I would assume, unless someone else posts one, is how do you fix your price? And because, price is is determined by the market position, and therefore you'd fix that. Cost is not under your control because there are suppliers, there is a cost of input materials and all of that, transportation and those kinds of things. How do you mediate between the two? How do you fix the price and say, look, this is at level at which I want my Adukale products to sell at?
That's I think that
it's a separate program by itself. I know pricing theory, but
but it's again, see, one thing we are very sure, right? So we don't take the customers for granted, right? And no matter how much you can make this feel it's like a dark art, ultimately every housewife and every person who is a homemaker will know what is the price of rava, what is the price of urad dal, what is the price of dal, right? Ultimately, the ingredients that you use in all the products, more or less, are found as staples at home, right? It's not that nobody will know that we are doing something different. So ultimately, it's just a feel about how much a customer is willing to pay for this product, knowing that the ingredients are mentioned at the back of the pack, right? And it is what it is, right? You can't charge 100 to 150 rupees for a packet of 180 grams of cod bade because everybody knows at the end of the day, it is what it is, right? So we do some sort of a market survey. We figure out what, let's say, MTR or Mayas is charging, and we are at par at what generally MTR or Mayas do.
So you benchmark with competition.
Yeah, we benchmark with competition, and then we and it's very difficult for us because we don't have the scale that an MTR has, right? But and that is the reason that I can't give my customers for pricing something higher than MTR, because I say, what, we are small people, we can't afford that. But then customers will say, what, it's not my problem, and it is true, right? So it's a balance that we need to, and it's a constant process, right? That every month we track what the price of the raw materials is, and we figure out whether it's in the trend or not. All of those things happen. And these days, that it's because of the Ukraine war, the price of oil have shot up tremendously. What was it once 80 rupees a liter is now about 120 rupees a liter, right? So that affects our, but I can't change my MRP every time the price of oil increases, right? So there are some places where we get burned, but it's all part of the game, right? So,
I understand. Okay. And that gets us to the end of the session. But one, I would request both of you for if you were to give a piece of advice to someone starting off in the food business, in a similar food business, what would that one piece of advice be? First, Ashwath, then Bharat.
Yes, I think it's very, very welcome for people who have very unique food. They are capable of producing, enjoying, want to bring it to the larger market. Please do that. Work out a recipe, try out your own R&D, but bring out few flavors of the product quickly and give it to a set of people who would give adverse feedback. Take the feedback seriously and rework. Don't lose hopes. Eventually, you will come out with a recipe which will sell. And once you identify that, you just go and start marketing it. It will do well.
Bharat?
Quality, 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 and don't take your customer for granted.
Quality, quality, quality. Don't take your customer for granted. I think all wise words. And I think one important thing is this is a business that requires enormous customer focus, enormous hard work, attention to detail, and constantly experimenting, failing, and learning, right? That's also part of this whole thing. So thank you very much indeed, Bharat, for sharing your story about Adukale right from its origins to where you are today and your learnings. To Ashwath for his experiences of being part of the Adukale journey. Thank you very much. Thanks very much to the audience as well for your participation. Look forward to more such events in future. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.